started as this like alter ego, this character of mine, who was kind of like just a bit like a bigger than life character, who has parts of me, has parts of my story, but is kind of like this like like this Bruce Wayne character, like this like, I don't know, anti-hero or something like that. And I got the name Jone Jones because at the time I was picking my name, I was super into the band the Yeah Yeah Yeahs, and I really liked a name that was like the same word repeating, or kind of just like super simple, but would look super cool on a t-shirt or on like on a flyer or like a poster. So I liked the name Jones, and originally wanted it to be Jones Jones, but then I just removed the S from the first Jones, and I got Jone Jones. And then once I got that, I was like, oh, like, I think this is it. It just sounded right. So yeah, so that's how I got the name Jone Jones, and that's only been my artist name for about, I want to say maybe a year. I've been making music for much longer than that. I started making music when I was 10. I started on piano. I would come home and play. We had a grand piano growing up, and I would come home and play, just kind of like by ear and kind of mess around. My dad taught me a few scales, but I wasn't classically trained. And from there, I wrote like 3 piano compositions when I was about 11. Yeah, and after that, my parents got me a keyboard, and they got me GarageBand on a computer. And from then, like, I transitioned to producing, and once I started producing, I fell in love with that. And so I've been producing far longer than I've been singing. I've been producing since I was in 7th grade. I would just make every day after school, I would just come home and make like 3 beats. So I was making like 3 beats a day, and just getting better and learning and watching my favorite producers like Pharrell and Kanye, and just learning from them, trying to emulate their sound or their process. And then yeah, more so recently I've started trying to sing and play guitar. And luckily, since I'd been producing for so long, once I started singing and playing guitar, it was easy to then just start producing myself and writing and recording, because I already knew how to do all that. So yeah, that's kind of my story, and this is kind of where I'm at now as far as my music journey.
With producing, did you ever plan to start singing after learning how to produce, or did singing just come naturally where you just decided to try it as something new? Or did you knew that you wanted to sing going into producing?
I definitely didn't know I wanted to sing. I definitely couldn't sing. I used to rap a little bit, because growing up I listened to a lot of rap, and a lot of what I was producing was like rap beats. So I'd produce beats for my friends to kind of just rap for fun. And I would rap here and there, but singing was never something that I was necessarily like creatively inclined to. I remember I tried singing a little bit, but I remember just trying it. I was like, oh no, like this does not sound good. And so kind of over quarantine, I started just playing guitar and singing a little bit, and it definitely took a lot of work. Like, that was another thing too. With singing, it was all just like, it was all work. I don't think there was much talent there until once I was able to kind of break the barrier of like just singing bad. And then now more so I can see I've got a little bit more talent, and just from doing it and finding my tone, and yeah, now singing is like my like, it's interesting how like a voice is kind of an instrument, so I would kind of consider singing to be like an instrument, and I'd say, yeah, it's one of my favorite instruments now. So
with Jone Jones, the name, and the whole alter ego, how did you introduce that to everyone you knew, and how did that sort of become a brand for you?
I think initially, when I first made the name change, I think I'd asked maybe like my family what they thought of the name Jones.
Yeah.
And initially, like I remember my mom saying like, Do you have any other names you're thinking of? And I remember being like, dang, like she doesn't like the name, but then because I still like loved the name so much, even though they weren't like super crazy about it, that's when I knew, oh, Jone Jones is the name. And then as far as everyone else, like I think I made a post about it on Instagram, posting that my name was now Jone Jones, like my artist name, and then especially when I released Ghost, it was like a rebranding of Jone Jones and kind of like the like black and white, like luxury car, like suit and tie kind of look, and so somewhat of my own style, even when I'm not on stage or performing. I think it's definitely like an idea. Like Jone Jones is kind of a character that I want to be, even if I'm not all the time. I had tried a few. I'm still kind of multi-genre right now, but I've tried. Initially, I was very pop and kind of pop, like pop rock, punk.
Yeah.
I guess, and I think I made the switch when I was with Ghost. Actually, when I first wrote Ghost, first time writing in this kind of like blues, funk, alternative rock, Alabama Shakes meets like Arctic Monkey, and I'm a big fan of both of those bands, and I think it definitely was me kind of channeling a little bit of their sound, a little bit of that blues sound, and I remember writing Ghost, and I was like, oh man, like this is better than I've written. This is the sound it was like an elevated sound, and I was like, oh, like this is what I wanna do. And so after that song, then I wrote a whole EP kind of around the song Ghost and around that sound, and I was like, yep, this is the sound that I really want to do. This is the sound that I feel like my vocal tone and just like my essence as an artist, I think flows really, really well through it, because it's like, it's very subtle. It's like this subtle, cool, I don't know, it all just really works. It all just really works well together. The black and white with the blues sound, the outfits, and so yeah, it took a little experimenting, but I've kind of found what works for me.
Yeah, and I remember too, before you were Jone Jones, even though they were kind of similar, it was definitely a switch. Kind of when you sent me the Ghost song, it was something new that I heard from you that I didn't necessarily expect from you, knowing the genre you were kind of into before. And that was really interesting, seeing how you transitioned to that. And so when it comes to making the music, songs together and kind of going into the studio, how does that creative process look? How does that kind of begin?
Lately, it starts usually with drums. Like I'll look for a drum sample, and I mean, I would love to eventually just be writing with a band, but for now, finding a drum sample is kind of like starting with a drummer. Well, I'll have like the drum samples playing a beat, and I'm kind of just riffing. Like I'll pick up my guitar and start plucking out some chords, plucking out some ideas. Once I get a solid chord progression, lay the bass line down, and from there I usually start with the hook. I try to find like what either the most catchy or the most like the kind of like what the point of the song is going to be. And once I have the hook, I'll kind of go from there as far as like storytelling goes, with like, okay, the hook is this, why am I saying this? Is it a romance? Is it just like what is the subject? And kind of like basically tell a story from verse 1, hook, verse 2, hook, maybe a bridge, like an outro or something. So that's typically how my creative process goes, but sometimes it'll start, I'll just pick up a guitar, find some chords, write a song fully on guitar, like on my acoustic, and then take it to my computer. But yeah, it's kind of different here and there.
with your creative process, your creative journey, because I've had this happen plenty of times before, where I've had a block, I guess you would call it a creative block in the things that I create, where I just don't know what to do or how to continue on. How do you, like, what happens when you come upon those situations, and what do you do to kind of resolve it?
Yeah, there's a really good book that I'm reading by Rick Rubin, and it kind of changed my whole view of the creative process, especially as someone who definitely struggled with getting bursts of creative energy and having like a full stop or a full block, and kind of being like just kind of basically powerless, like to whether or not like I felt inspired. And there's a really good chapter in the book that talks about kind of ideas, and when we get ideas and when we channel ideas, and basically that when we're getting ideas, it's kind of like this river flowing, and they're like given to us, and if we get the idea and kind of just sit with it and don't act it out or create the idea out, the idea will leave us and flow to another person, and they'll be able to act it out, or they'll be able to create that idea. And it talks about like the best thing you can do when you get an idea, like I'll put it into an example. If I get an idea for a song, let's say I get like a chorus, I get a really good chorus idea, I play it out, get the chorus done, and then I'm struggling to do a verse or a second verse because I'm like, oh man, the chorus and the first verse is so good, but the second verse is just not, it's not perfect, it's not as good as the other. And then he about it's best to write when you get the idea, fully flesh out the idea. If it's a song, fully write the song out, beginning to end. You can have a rough draft, maybe the second verse isn't perfect or great, but fully getting that pure idea. Because oftentimes when we get that first spark, it's the purest form of that kind of idea that we're channeling. And that definitely changed my whole like writing process, because now when I sit down and do something, if I'm starting a song, I know, okay, I'm starting this, I have to finish it in this sitting. Whether or not it's a good first draft, I've got to finish it. And once I started doing that, I wrote so much more music, and I was able to accomplish so much more, like more ideas. And that's another thing too, is like, even if I'd write the first rough draft and maybe I'm like, oh, this is horrible at first, going away for maybe a few days and then coming back to it with fresh ears, you hear it differently, and you're kind of less hard on yourself about like whether the idea is good or not. And oftentimes I always like, either the song just stays the same, like I'm like, oh, actually this rough draft is like really good, and I think this is what I want the song to be. And so I would just say, advice for like creatives, whether it's anything, like I think just having the discipline is a huge one. Having the discipline to finish what you start. Finish anything you start, I think, is a good principle to have, because like it can be paralyzing to just have a bunch of started things, a bunch of projects that are never ending, because you get bored and move on to the next thing. And oftentimes what'll happen is if you're doing a project, for example, if I'm doing a song that I'm like forcing myself, so it kind of turns into like homework, quote unquote. So I'm like, oh, I have to write this even though I'm not super passionate about it. While I'm like finishing the song I don't necessarily like, I'll get an idea to start a new song. And oftentimes that'll kind of help me to motivate me to, all right, I'll finish this song real quick and then I'll get another song. And it kind of works as like procrastination technique. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that was kind of a lot, but the gist of what I'm trying to say is like finishing what you start to finish, even if it's bad. Like just getting into the habit of just finishing what you start is a big one.